The Amazing Digital Circus's brand new trailer just dropped, and it is filled with information that is absolutely insane. Not to mention, we do officially get a date for when it will be released. And to make things even more insane, there are characters that we've never seen before and a new location. With all this information, it's a lot to take in, but make sure you watch this video from beginning to end to get the whole story. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, grab your popcorn and a drink and let's go ahead and dive in.
The next all-new episode of the Amazing Digital Circus. The funny circus gang takes a trip to the deliciously delectable Candy Canyon Kingdom.
At the beginning of the trailer, we see Ragatha, Gangle, and Pomni sitting in front of a portal. Kane explains that this is the portal to Candy Canyon Kingdom, which means this is going to be the new location that the entirety of episode 2 is most likely going to take place. However, he does not include a few of the characters we've known from episode 1, a big one being Jax as well as Kinger and Zooble. Now, this does bring up some confusion as a lot of us believe that episode 2 was going to focus on Jax's POV. However, if you continue on through the trailer, you do notice that Jax does eventually end up here, so he must get here in a different way. And this can be further proven in the next shot of the trailer as a giant candy-like elephant seems to be pulling the cast along. Now, the next 4 seconds of this trailer are very telling. For one, we see the cast walking into a group of people celebrating their entrance towards the kingdom. Most likely, they have been called here to be the heroes of some sort of travesty. But we also need to focus on the name of this location. It is the Candy Canyon after all. And that means that the gang has been brought here to do something cowboyish related, which is probably why Jax is holding this sawed-off old-school shotgun, and the following frame shows a new character by the name of Gummy Goo. Now, what's interesting about this is he also has 2 more minions that are around a campfire behind him. Now, I don't know about you, but there's something devious about the look in their eyes. These 3 look like they're going to play the villain role in this episode. Now, another frame that I do want to bring up is the look on Pomni's face. Pomni looks absolutely worried right before they show those characters. Does this mean that they're going to be getting into something almost forcefully?
Sounds like a real radiant riot, right, Bubble?
Huh? Where am I?
What's wrong, Bubble? Why are you acting like you don't know who I am?
What? I asked where I was, not who you are. Also, I'm not Bubble.
Going back a couple more frames after watching the video, I realized it looks like Jax is even forcing the characters into doing something they don't want to do by the hands of his newly acquired sawed-off shotgun. As if you look at Gangle's facial expression in this exact frame, you'll notice she went from being happy to now crying. And she looks to be the one driving in this scene, unlike when they were getting carried by the elephant. Now, my theory here is that they are driving the giant semi-truck that you see in the next scene crashing up against one another. One thing that I do want to point out though, if you notice, this truck looks very familiar to the one that's next to Gummy Goo and the rest of his gang. Now, even more interesting, it looks like Pomni somehow got herself onto the top of this truck, which makes me wonder, was the gang trying to hijack this truck from Gummy Goo and his boys? And is that what initially gets Gummy Goo on the rest of the crew's bad side? Now, the next section of the trailer is actually really confusing. It shows Pomni bouncing around her room almost like she's getting possessed. But in reality, if you look closely, it looks like this block has glitched out inside of her room and pushed her all around it. And speaking of glitches, Kane seems to be talking to Pomni, however, he keeps referring to her as Bubble. So, of course, that brings up a few new questions. For one, how on earth has Kane mistaken Pomni for Bubble? There's obviously been some type of confusion in the coding of the digital circus, and I assume we're going to be seeing a lot more of Pomni's room since it's been hinted towards not only on Twitter, but also this scene right here. I'm assuming what happens is if a character doesn't wake up in enough time, they get pushed around by the block that you see there on the screen. The following scene shows the Candy Princess holding Ragatha's hand, and look in the background, this place is filled with NPCs. I'm assuming this frame is from after they've completed whatever goal was in hand, as the rest of the characters seem to be smiling, and I'm just assuming Ragatha is going to play a big part in their success. In the following frame, we see Jax and Gangle stranded on a boat, but even more interesting is the fact that we get our first look at the candy monster. This same monster has been teased around a little bit in the past, and it's really interesting to get our first glimpse at him. Now, again, I think this character is going to play a huge role in part 2, and I think he's going to have some type of hypnosis powers. If you look closely at his eyes, it looks like he's putting somebody in a trance. Now, the following scenes show a lot of cool different POVs as to the different things that I've already explained in the trailer. That includes one of the crocodile minions getting whipped around, as well as Pomni hanging on for dear life to what looks like that same truck in the previous scene. And speaking of this truck, look at Jax here. It looks like one of the crocodile minions ended up finding him and looks to be sneaking up on him. And this doesn't look like the only time that Jax is going to be in distress this episode, as the next scene shows him hanging from that same truck as the rest of the crew seems to try and pick him up. And speaking of falling, Pomni looks like she's caught herself again in another black hole. Does that mean that she's actually found another glitch in the system and potentially able to escape once again? Or did she do something even worse? I'm really hoping this isn't a POV of her being abstracted, but if you ask me, it's more than likely a nightmare that takes place before the episode. And speaking of abstracted, we haven't seen Zooble at all up until this point until we see her in this frame here. Now, this obviously takes place in the main center stage of the circus. And we can point out the obvious that Zooble really doesn't like going along with all the different missions that are put in place by Kane. And based on her facial expression, it doesn't look like things have really changed in this episode. But outside of the visual look at the preview, you do need to take a quick listen to what Kane is actually saying to Pomni. It looks like they're going back and forth with Kane being confused, obviously Pomni sounding like Bubble to him. And Pomni is more concerned about where she is, not who she is.
Oh!
Huh? Where am I?
What's wrong, Bubble? Why are you acting like you don't know who I am?
What? I asked where I was, not who you are. Also, I'm not Bubble. What's happening?
It's called improv, Pomni! The first rule of improv is to never pretend you're not Bubble!
Now, Kane seems to pretend as if he thinks this is all some type of improv act, telling her that she needs to always pretend to be Bubble. But I do think there's some concern in Pomni's voice. It seems to me like she's getting bounced around, and that's proven further after we get the initial date of the episode, which should be March 3rd, but more on that later. It seems as if Pomni gets transported once again to what she says is a meat locker or freezer.
I still don't really know anything about this episode, and I've been teleported to a meat freezer.
Now, is this confirmation as to what the episode 3's location will be? Either way, I think it's really important to take every bit of this trailer and just dissect it. And I'm not going to take her words for granted here. I think they did a really good job at maybe teasing the next location. But regardless, going back to the initial trailer, it's really exciting that we finally get a date for episode 2, as it's been so long since we saw the first episode. Obviously, these animations take a lot of time, and you can see there's improvement literally between episodes here. The way that they went about graphically making this, it looks outstanding. I know for sure I'm excited for episode 2 and what this insane story is going to provide us with. But ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up the trailer breakdown, and as more information gets provided to us, we will definitely be covering it here on the channel, so make sure you hit that subscribe button and hit that like button if you're new and want to see more. Regardless, thank you again for all the love and support, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, check out this video here on screen. Peace out!